what do you think are the elements which could be, tagged as crucial when you're talking for a startup or an organization that they should build on to create brand visibility?
See, on brand visibility, it starts again from finding who your target audience is,
Mhm.
uh, your consumer, your target consumer, and focusing on that, focusing your attention on building the visibility, addressing it to that target audience or that target consumer. But along with that, it's about when you're creating a brand, I like to say this is that visibility, a brand visibility is possibly the first step towards creating brand awareness.
Correct. Yeah.
And that brand awareness is more of a different subconscious state of mind where you're aware of something.
Mhm.
But before you get aware of something, you need to be exposed to it. And that's what visibility does. And so the starting point would be to finding and focusing on your target audience. Your brand should you should have created a unique selling proposition for the brand itself that differentiates you from the others.
Mhm.
Uh, it should you should be able to, through your visibility, whatever actions you take, be able to communicate what your brand stands for. And not just the product intrinsics, but also as a brand, what does the brand itself stand for?
Mhm.
uh, that the consumer can have a connection with the brand, therefore. In a sense, the visibility exposes the core values of the brand
Correct. Yeah.
to your consumer. And in all of this, perception matters a lot because that's what the consumer takes in first.
Mhm.
And so that perception is so important because that visibility is the way what you do on visibility is the way where you will start to create a unique personality for that brand. As I said, what does a brand stand for? What's the unique personality of the brand? And over time, that would evolve. Obviously, through the brand's life cycle, you would be able to evolve it, and you need to evolve it because the consumer's tastes are changing. He's evolving himself.
Right.
So in marketing, we define what we call as a brand visual identity. And, that's what helps to connect your brand. That's what helps you convey your brand story. That's what, in a way, makes your brand immediately recognizable. So it starts from there for me. And and then what do you do with that visibility once you would go to use media where the consumer is.
Right.
What depends on where what is the consumer, what is your target audience consuming,
Mm.
whether that medium is online or offline. So you go where your target is consuming information and where you have the maximum number of opportunities to connect with that consumer.
Mhm.
So I think that is, in a nutshell, is what I believe what brand visibility has to do. And in an ever competing space, you have to be able to break through the clutter.
Very true, sir.
And that's something that's absolutely, which is the big challenge actually. So that's something that we brands have to struggle today in today's world. So it is that actually in a way.
So that actually brings me to the next question that I have. That, like you very correctly mentioned, there is too much noise on too many platforms because your brands are now striving in a very competitive environment, and the user has visibility to brands on like digital platforms, social media platforms, FM, TVs, websites, everything. So how does a brand strike a balance, a new age brand strike a balance in creating brand presence in these social platforms, but also have the ability to stand out, to stand away from the clutter, or to make the right kind of noise amongst the white noise that is being generated?
See, as I said, the first thing is about what does the brand stand for?
Mhm.
And it starts when you conceptualize the brand. So you there is a brand story to it. There's a certain character that gets associated with the brand, its personality. And when you have been able to define that nicely, then it kind of falls in place in terms of what is your communication going to be, and through that communication, are you able to make that emotional connect with the consumer
Correct.
and capture a share of his mind with your brand? And and I guess you have to be in a way very unique for you to be different in and addressing a different uh, bringing to the consumer a new proposition that
Right.
engages with him, that you can engage him with, and otherwise you'll be lost in all of this. And it is very challenging, I can say that. And we know it from the alcohol space because there are so many regulations that prevent me from advertising the alcohol brands.
Hmm.
And so you resort to association, you resort to experiential events
Right.
where you connect with the consumer, where you provide the consumer an experience, which is not simply about the consumption of the alcohol, but it's about things associated with that brand that brings the personality of the brand to life for the
Hmm.
consumer, for him to engage with it and feel something about it. And for example, in the case of a brand like Bacardi, we associate ourselves very strongly with the music platform.
Right.
And we have created platforms, brand platforms, where musicians in India have been launched actually.
Hmm.
And they have launched their careers with music, and which we have supported. And we bring a music festival like the Bacardi Weekender to India, which is
Hmm.
the first ever such music festival that has happened in India. And we've consistently done it for 10 years.
Yes.
So that it gets embedded as part of what I call popular culture,
Hmm.
where the consumer then feels that connection with the brand. So it's all of this, and then you have to then make a choice about uh, how you do it, where you do it, what are the occasions you will engage with the consumer. But what is necessary is that there is a consistent theme. There's a consistent theme that runs through every bit of your activation that you do at different touch points with the consumer.
Right.
It's what we call engaging with the consumer through the line. So while you might engage with them at a festival, but is he seeing the same stimulus? Are you still stimulating him that when he goes to buy the alcohol at the shop? Does he
Hmm.
still see music connection there? Or in the trade or in the bar that he goes and orders a drink? So the constant messaging is in different ways that stimulus is given to the consumer,
Hmm.
and that kind of then starts making sense uh, as you stitch it all together. And so it's about being consistent in your messaging. It's about being consistent in the way you appear. The brand appears before the consumer at the same consistent quality and the same level of engagement with the consumer.
Hmm. So that kind of gives you an edge because you are delivering the same quality and experience to the consumer at
Yes,
every touch point, basically.
yes.
So that helps you to stand out.
But it's also important that you have to, if you're putting out a promise, then your
Mhm.
product has to deliver on that promise.
Very true, sir.
Otherwise, you know, there is one important aspect about this is authenticity.
Hmm.
And if you lose out on that, then you will lose your consumers very fast.
Correct.
You might not be able to even recruit the consumer into the brand. But
Hmm.
he has to be able to, while the story might be great, but it has to culminate somewhere in something that is authentic
Hmm.
and real to the consumer.
Very true, sir. So, since we're talking about an ecosystem, you may mention events and partnerships. So, within an ecosystem, we believe partnerships and networking helps, and it goes a long way in the growth of a company. So can you share that how a new age brand can approach established companies for such partnership opportunities?
Uh, you mean for a brand to get into a partnership? Sorry.
So what I'm trying to say is that, for example, I'm a new age brand and I'm trying to, increase my outreach, customer outreach, or my brand visibility. So an effective way for me to do that is to get into some sort of an association, partnerships, event tie-ups, or collaborations with brands, with bigger established brands, so that I can have a same outreach as the big established brand would have. But that obviously involves a lot of cost benefit analysis as well. So, and I believe that when it comes to branding and marketing, it's a cost that a company has to bear. So, how much is you feel like how much is too much cost when it comes to spending money for such collaborations or partnerships?
See, first of all, the collaboration has to be of like-minded or similar in the similar space,
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise it'll be like apples and oranges, and it has to be complementing each other. If your brand does, if there's a fit, basically that has to be there, and then the collaboration works. Uh, you have to be careful that your brand is not overshadowed by who you're collaborating with, and it makes sense to both,
Mm-hmm.
that there is something for both in that. The advantage has to be that you are through that collaboration being able to reach out to a consumer you might not have been able to reach out on your own.
Correct.
If it meets that, then yes, it's an advantage, because you are using that collaboration, that platform, to be able to reach to a wider audience, which you on your own might not have been able to achieve that.
True.
So in the sense, when you're looking at the costs, you really have to see the return on that investment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting into this collaboration, it's going to cost me so much, but what's the cost per reach of getting to that kind of a wider audience? And if that starts to make sense, then yes, you would do that. You would definitely do that.
Mm-hmm. And so, what kind of advice would you want to give to young entrepreneurs who want to strengthen their brand further? Like from moving from brand visibility to brand awareness, like you mentioned. So, what kind of advice would you give?
See, I think it you first is that you have to make sure that your brand stays relevant to the
Mm-hmm.
consumer, because the consumer is an ever evolving person, and tastes, choices will evolve. They will move on to something else. So there are two parts to that. Is one is, are you recruiting new consumers into your brand?
Mm-hmm.
Second is, are you retaining consumers in your brand? So it's recruitment, it's retention.
Mm-hmm.
And the third part might be actually the people who have left you and moved to something else, or have flitted, or
Mm-hmm.
kind of went into something, another brand. Are you able to re-recruit them back into your this thing?
Right.
That's the whole challenge about brands, recruitment, retention, and re-recruitment.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you achieve that? And each of them, for each of these three parts, you would have to have a strategy that will be distinct from each other, because the objectives are different, the target is a little different.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're recruiting somebody, you will have to have a different strategy, because that's a new consumer. It's his, for example, it's his first foray into alcohol. For example, if I'm wanting to offer a breezer, but I will have to have a different way of connecting with that consumer.
Mm-hmm.
To retain him or her, what do I do? What are the new offerings that the brand can bring to that consumer? I mean, I'm just keeping it very simple right now.
Yeah.
What are the new offering? What are the new news that you can bring to the consumer? Are you able to extend the brand to different products,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore give them a wider choice within that brand?
Mm-hmm.
And if they've left you for something else, how are you able to bring them back? What new things that you can bring them back? if, again, keeping the example very simple, if he's moved on from low alcohol beverage of, say, which was 5%, and he's gone to strong beer, for example, can I bring him back into ready to drink by offering him a stronger ready to drink? Can I give him an 8% or a 9% alcohol content, this thing? Also, in the way we engage with them in the various activations, because the age profile of each of these buckets are probably different also. The recruitment of the younger, his taste in music could be different. And so there are many things that you have to do. But in the journey of your brand, my only advice is that, there are no shortcuts.
Sure.
And one has to always stay the course. And as I said before in the breeze example, I mean, we were at one time thought about it, but we said we continued and we never regretted it after that. And being consistent and true to the brand, and it's the strategy always. Be consistent. I mean, brands keep trying multiple things, and you keep chucking something on the wall and hoping something will stick.
Sure.
So as long as you're listening to your consumer, you're staying connected to the consumer, and you're keeping your ear close to what's happening, you're learning from those consumer insights, and you're evolving, your brand will continue to keep growing, and you will be relevant.
So I think the key takeaway from what you mentioned regarding this was what I found pretty wonderful, that there are different stages and the ability to maintain a consistent strategy, but also to maintain relevance, the ability to evolve.
Yes.
So it's actually a mix of consistency and the ability to evolve. So
you see, the challenge for any business, and even for a business like, if I give our example of Bacardi, I mean, the company has been around for 158 years.
right.
But what works for us, if we can still behave like startups and not think that we have, we have arrived in life and we know what we're talking about. The consumer doesn't care. The challenge has always been to create a brand, create a business so strong that you are the first choice for the consumer, if not the only choice for the consumer.
That's true, sir.
So how do you do that? How do you create a brand that is so strong that you are the only choice for the consumer? That, to me, is what marketing, what businesses have to achieve in relation to the consumer.
So I think your insights into that would be pretty eye-opening to all our listeners and our audience. So now, if we move from, say, the corporate journey to, say, a personal investment philosophy, so what do you believe has been your investment philosophy over the period of your,
To be honest, for most part of my younger life, my salaries and most youngsters would probably understand what I'm saying. You barely have enough money to think about investing. And if you're married and you've got 2 children, then you're already paying through your nose for school fees and rents and other things. And my only advice, and I have the benefit of hindsight because I've been through that journey. My first advice would be start as early as you can. That's my investment philosophy. is the earlier one starts, the better. I did not, to be honest. I did not. And let me narrate a very simple short story that triggered it for me. I was working in an alcobev company, and I was the general manager of finance of the company. I must have been 36, 38. 36 or so, 35, 36, I think. And one of my juniors one day walks into office with a box of sweets and says, "Sir, I want to share laddu with you, sir." I said, "What happened?" "Sir, I bought a house. I bought a flat." I said, "Listen, please sit down. Are we paying you that much that you can go and buy a house? I have not bought a house." And he says, "Sir, you don't think enough, sir. You're too busy working. You need to think beyond your work life to think about your family and your future and build a house for yourself." And, that opened that was that, in your life, we have these trigger moments that set you off on a journey. And that's when I thought, and this was 1995 or something, where it was not easy to buy a flat. You to get a loan, you had to go to somebody like Citibank and pre-approved loan at 18% per annum. Those were the borrowing rates at that point in time. But that guy did it. He did it. He begged, borrowed from family and friends, had a little money, went with his salary slips, etc., went to Citibank, got a differential loan for the rest, bought a flat, moved into the flat, told me, "Sir, I will save on the rent I was paying, I will pay the EMI. I know it will be a struggle, but I have to start somewhere, sir." I said, "Listen, this guy is wiser than me." I went home, I sat my wife down and we started thinking about it. And then I actually started thinking about investing in my first home. And but it was difficult to pay EMIs when the rate of interest was 18%, and then later on it became 14. But I think the other part of the philosophy is to have that confidence in yourself that you will grow in your career, your salaries will rise, and things will become easier for you to pay off the EMIs, because you still, when you're young, you can still get a 15, 20-year tenure on your loan. Things will ease off. The things will ease off. I mean, you should have that belief in yourself, I think. That's the thing. But yeah, the other part of the philosophy, and it's again advice from my experiences, is to decide what you can put aside from your inflows, monthly inflows, and say, "I can set aside something." And once you have decided that, stay on that, stick to that, and say, I mean, don't be fickle. And the 2 months I've done it, and third month I can't do it. However small that amount might be, 10,000, 20,000, 40,000 rupees a month, 50,000 rupees a month. And Brijesh knows that. I mean, I started SIPs, for example, at 50,000 rupees a month. A few years ago only, maybe 7, 8 years ago. But that was what I could, because I had a lot of other liabilities that I had to meet. But whatever that amount was, and I started there and said, at least there's some amount that is going. It sets into place a certain discipline with yourself, that not everything that I bring in I can spend.
That's true.
Because I've decided that I need to put away something, and that's the rest is what I can spend on my household, my pleasures, my whatever else that I have, and do that. And so no matter how small that amount you might decide, but start somewhere and be consistent with that. Then sit down at the end of each year and review it and say, okay, can I increase that a little bit? Can I do that? And progressively you will start realizing that you have started to build a little corpus for yourself. And when you realize that, it only encourages you kind of do better on that. And I think that's the one thing that I would. And if you don't have the time, find a friend, an advisor, a financial advisor is even better, and trust that person. Have that implicit trust in that person, so that he can help you and take care of that. In my early days, it was my father When I was starting out my career, who I used to trust a lot, and he would tell me, do this, whatever it is, even when your first job and opening your bank account and putting an FD or putting something. So you need that one person in your early days to be able to advise you. Not all of us have the wherewithal to go and read stock markets and see the index and then say buy, sell, on which mutual fund to put and which to exit and what to do, etc. And is the market going down? Should I get scared and exit or whatever it is? So I leave that to a professional who can manage it. That's his job, man. That he understands that every day. You guys understand that every day. So I leave it to you guys to manage that. Uh, so that's what I would say in terms of investments.
I think that kind of summarizes learning from your experience and your hindsight. So, and it resonates with a lot of us youngsters because I think the ability to have the maturity to start early and to maintain consistency, that is the key to a good investment strategy. And that applies to whichever age bracket you're in, whichever financial capacity you have. So,
Absolutely.
so I think that.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you this, the journey for me really, the initial part of my investment was my first home, my first flat. Uh, and there are some investments which you will never regret, I think. And this was one of those because I would have bought it at a period. I had booked it in 1999. I got possession in 2002. Today, 20 years later, that value is 10 times that. But you might feel good about it today. But during that first 5-7 years, when you were paying through your nose the EMIs and running a house on a meager salary, it hurt. But I think that pain was worth it when you look back because that was your first home. Everybody's proud of the first home they bought for themselves and for their family. And I think that first plunge is important. So for a long time, that was the only thing I was focused on. My entire salary is to go to my household expenses, my school fees, a little bit of travel here, and paying that damn EMI. And there was nothing else left. The journey then started when I moved from one job to the other job and I got some PF or gratuity and a lump sum money came. That's when I went to my dear friend, Mr. Damodaran, and I said, "Ye pakdo, tell me what to do, put it somewhere, because if I leave it in my bank account, it'll get spent." And it started from there, actually. And then after that, as long as you keep that discipline slowly and that, it really does work. It really does work.
So now, if you talk about, during the course of your professional journey, you've had a lot of learnings and insights. So, what advice would you give to the new generation in general when they're starting out?
Oh. You see, first I would say is that your job should not be defined by the title on your visiting card. I love saying this to everybody who joins Bacardi. It should not be defined. That is the job description which was defined by HR.
Mm-hmm.
They recruited you because they had a slot. They wanted somebody to come and fill that job. But once you're in, don't limit yourself to the boundaries created by that job title. Think about how you can expand the boundaries of your role and make it your own. Define it by yourself. So when you do that, you're beginning to then make an impact to the business you were employed by, to the role that you are doing, because you're doing much more than what you were asked to do. And by doing that, you will gain by that experience. But otherwise, at least from my experience, from my past, I would say within a year or two, I started getting bored with what I'm doing.
So, that is an issue, yeah.
You need to be doing something different. learning something different, moving on. And those experiences become invaluable because somebody will notice. Somebody will notice that this guy, this person is capable of doing this and this and this and this. And each of those increases the number of opportunities you can move into in times to come. That's the first piece of advice. Don't let your role be defined by the title on your visiting card. And, a lot of people think that, they should change jobs. And people do change jobs very quickly, 2 years, 3 years. I understand that. They look for experiences. They look for take that career in a new direction. But my advice would be do that if your current employer cannot give you that. Ask the question, be fearless to ask that question from your current employer. Normally that question gets addressed only in exit interviews. By the time it's too late. We think, yeah, nobody's asking me. They will not ask you. You must go and ask. As an employee, you are responsible for your own career as much as your employer has to for your career development. But you own it yourself first. So if you feel you're getting stuck, you're getting bored, you're not doing that, what have you done about it? Have you gone to your manager? Have you gone to your HR and had a conversation with them to say, what next? Is there something else I can do? Because if you want to wait for them, they'll have 20 other priorities, right? So look for those experiences within your organization. And I tell you why. Because in the time that you spent in that organization, apart from doing your job, whatever, you've already created a certain value for that organization. You have created a certain equity for yourself, right? Which your current employer recognizes better than somebody new, because they're going to start again.
That is true, sir.
They're going to start again to start thinking about how do I build my brand equity again, my individual brand equity. It might take 6 months for some, might take longer for some. But if I've already spent 2 years, 3 years in the company, and if I've done reasonably well, I stand for something. That's the value which your current employer should be able to recognize and should be able to give you opportunities to move in different directions. So that brand equity that you can create, it defines who you are, what you stand for, all of that. Third is, do not be afraid to step outside of your comfort zone. नहीं तो वो हिंदी में कहते हैं ना, वो कुएं का मेंढक.
Right, sir.
You can decide, do I want to be the frog in that well, or do I want to swim in the ocean? So the biggest learnings that you will get is when you step outside of your comfort zone. Because when you're uncomfortable, then the mind starts working overtime to say, I got to learn something. I got to learn something to be able to do this. I do not know what to do here. You will work that much harder. Because you need to prove yourself again. Because in the past job where you were comfortable, you already proved yourself. Then you are on autopilot.
That is true, sir.
So only when you are moved out of your comfort zone, when the juices start pumping, you start thinking, I don't want to fail. I need to do something. I got to learn something. I got to acquire some knowledge. I got to do something. I got to run faster. So that's when the biggest learnings will come. That's when the biggest growth will also come. The growth will come because moving out of your comfort zone means you're taking a risk. And as an investment professional, you would know that the bigger the risk, the bigger the return.
Yes, sir.
True for your career. Take the risk sometimes. Take that risk. most youngsters believe, most people, not just youngsters, most people believe my career has to be always a progression upwards.
Mm-hmm.
I need to keep moving vertically upwards. That's not right. You should have the ability to move sideways and then grow again. Sometimes you have to move down to again grow again because you need to reboot to
Mm-hmm.
learn a new skill, to get a different experience, and that experience catapults you faster to a different trajectory then. Otherwise, this will be very slow. It might not happen also, but there'll be blockers somewhere in between. Somebody is there already, oh, vacancy hoga, tab, only then you will get it. But have the ability to step out of your comfort zone, move horizontally, move down if you have to move down, and then climb back up. And moving out of your comfort zone and restarting means you have to have a lot of patience. You have to have the ability to again, as I say, stay the course, be consistent, think about it always, and it's good to be to have a dream always. It's good to have ambitions. That I don't say that's wrong, but with that, always have a sense of purpose. What do you stand for? What do you want to achieve? All that. So that's all. That's it from me. I've
Thank you,
taken a
sir.
lot of your time.
No, sir, it was a really wonderful conversation. I think the key takeaway to all our listeners today would be that resilience, patience, and along with the ability to change is how you can grow, whether you're talking about a brand, because essentially an individual is also creating a brand for itself, himself or herself. So when it comes to building a brand for yourself or your company, these are the key things that kind of take you the long way. So it was a really interesting and insightful conversation with you. Thank you so much for taking out
Thank
the
you,
time.
Swara. Thank
And
you.
thank you so much, sir. Have a good day.